All right. So that was a bit of a sad video, but I'm thankful that you're all here so that we can learn more about sea life and more about fishes and marine life and aquatic animals in general. And so that we can, improve what we know about them and, how we can apply that into our outreach and our activism. Really thankful for all of you being here and, caring enough about sea life to be here because they're not spoken up enough for, and that's part of why we wanted to do this workshop. So this is an AAM workshop. Thanks for being here. This is fishing and marine life. We really appreciate you being here. Today's presenters are going to be myself. I'm Trey. Then we also have Peyton, Erica, and Shannon who are going to be presenting. For sake of time, I'm just going to get right into it, and I'm going first, so I will start us out. Can everybody see the slideshow here?
I just invited a lot of people, so if people come in, can you watch for that?
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for sure. Thank you.
Thanks. I just posted it. All right.
Can everybody see my presentation here? Cool. All right, so I'm going to be talking about animals used for bait. I, before this, did not really have a ton of information about animals used for bait, and there don't seem to be a ton of studies or, information by other activists or anything like that. So I thought this would be a good topic to cover. I hope you find it useful and informative. I also wanted to talk about this because I remember when I was a child, my dad would take me fishing, and I never wanted to hook the worm because, first of all, I was a kid and I thought it was a little bit gross. And also it seemed cruel, and it's one of those instances as a child where, your gut instinct is like, yeah, this is cruel, but we're kind of taught that it's okay. And that's just something I remember from my childhood. And so I just wanted to talk about bait animals today, or animals used as bait. So there are a ton of animals used for bait. They're not all on this list, but they include worms, minnows, frogs, chickens, or, they use their livers, lizards, bees, grasshoppers, crickets, and other insects. And then sometimes people use stuff like cheese that come from cows. So even the dairy industry is involved in like fishing in this way because people use cheese, and sometimes even use like donuts and stuff like that have dairy in them. Turkey dogs, hot dogs, and shrimp and caterpillars. And the one that surprised me the most were minks. I saw a video when I was doing my research of someone who bought a skinned mink for bait. And what I think is happening there is, fur trappers are, trapping minks and then having them skinned for their fur, and then they sell the body to a bait shop or something like that. And then people who go fishing for sharks, they'll use stingrays as bait, mackerel, and other fish. And there's probably a ton of animals on here that are exploited that are not even on this list. But yeah, but some of the most popular are, I hate to use the word popular, but some of the most often used are worms and minnows. So where do bait animals come from? Some people just hunt for animals. So they might go fishing and then they, start looking under some rocks for a worm or something like that, or a frog may hop along and they take their fishing net and catch the frog, hook the frog in. It could be anything like that. People also do do-it-yourself setups. So somebody might do a worm farm, like a small worm farm in their backyard. There's so many videos on YouTube just teaching people how to create their own worm farms so that they don't have to go to bait shops and purchase the animals themselves. And of course, when I was a kid, that's what we always did. We would go to a local bait shop or a gas station or something, and we would purchase, worms or, whatever the bait animal might be. So this is a short little video from one of the largest bait. I think at the time that this was recorded, they were the largest. I think they're still the largest DMF bait company. They sell hundreds of millions of worms every year. So this is a video about them and their process. So I'm gonna show that to you. Forgive me at the beginning. I'm gonna skip through a little bit to find the right spot, but hopefully you'll find this informative.
Hey everybody, Jamie Anderson with Anderson Middle Farm in Lone Oak, Arkansas. Just make a quick little video. We get a lot of questions about our hatchery and that type of thing. Can't reveal too many secrets, but I will give you a short little shot of what we're doing in here. But what I've got behind me, just some of these blue tanks, we've got all the mats that are covered with eggs that we bring in the hatchery, and they come in here and they hatch out, and then some of them go straight to consumers, stock ponds and lace with, and then the bulk of them will go on out to our farm and go into our ponds, the nursery ponds, and then grow out ponds and get ready to bring them to you all spring, summer, and fall. So I'll get a little close up here of what the fry that are in the tank right now.
So this is minnows. The minnow video played first. Sorry about that. I'll go back to the worm one. But these are mats that the minnow eggs are on here where they're hatching.
That's just a quick little shot. There's approximately 1.5 to 2 million fry in that one tank. That's kind of what we shoot for an average. Sometimes higher, sometimes lower, just kind of depending on all the factors we deal with. But I'll give you another little shot here of the hatchery behind me. But we'll do well over 1 billion fish out of this hatchery each season. Golden shiners, goldfish, fatheads, and black salters. So that's just a little bit of what it looks like. Thank y'all.
So as you heard there, they do over 1 billion fish in this one hatchery that they sell. That includes like goldfish, and I'm not sure if they sell those for you know, companion animals, or you know, if they use those as bait as well. But I mean, I guess whoever buys them can do whatever they want with them, because there's you know, not many rules about fish. But yeah, so what they do is they put these mats with the minnow eggs on them, and they put them in this hatchery, and then they hatch. And what I've found that this company does is they put the egg, at least from what I understand, they once the minnows hatch, they'll put them out in their local ponds that are, you know, right out back, and then the minnows will grow. And then when the time comes, they'll get like a big net and they'll go out in the pond and they'll catch them all. And that's kind of when the minnows are ready to be sent out. You can have minnows mailed to you through Amazon, you know, stuff like that. They're even shipped in the mail. It's pretty awful, but let me show you just a little commercial that they have. This commercial actually really reminds me of a Tyson chicken commercial that I see on television. They really try to appeal to the, you know, how many ever generations of farming, and it's in the family, and, you know, down home kind of southern local thing, you know. So I'll play that, and then we'll go back to the worms here in a second. So this is a commercial for the hatchery that you just saw that little video from.
Since our humble beginnings in 1949, IF Anderson Farms has evolved into the world's largest bait fish producer. Our hatchery is capable of producing over 1 billion fish per season, and our team is capable of overnighting them directly to your door. Multiple species available, the size you need, when you need them. Farm direct minnows delivered fresh to your door. IF Anderson Farms.
So even in that short clip, you can kind of see their process there. You can see the massive ponds they've got out here out back just to raise minnows this big. So yeah, like he said, you know, they put out about 1 billion fish in a season. So pretty crazy. So yeah, so again, like I said earlier, this is DMF Bait Co. And I think they're still the largest worm company in the world. This is the one I'm gonna have to skip through for a second. So Forgive me till I find the right spot here.
Community. He loves instead using it.
Fishing is a very well,
It's been passed on through generations of fishermen. Supplying the demand for live worms can seem challenging. Companies like DMF Bait, however, have managed to meet this challenge with a unique ability to transport live bait across the country.
DMF Bait is the world's largest packet bait dealer. We sell 6 to 12 million worms a week on average. That's enough worms annually to stretch over 7,000 miles. We attribute our success to state-of-the-art packaging, immediate live guarantee delivery nationwide.
The company was formed in 1977 by Dan, Mike, and Fred, 3 school teachers who were looking for summer work to supplement their teaching salaries. The company had originally invested in millions of redworms, only to fold a year later after realizing that redworms had no use in the cool Michigan waters. They did, however, discover quite a market for night crawlers.
The difference was day and night. Night crawlers need refrigeration. Night crawlers need 24-hour lighting. They also need significant air movement. They are hand-picked at night in the ground at fields and golf courses. So after they built this 3,000 square foot building in Keego Harbor, Michigan, they then bought a used 66 passenger school bus and employed their students to pick worms at night.
Dan, Mike, and Fred quickly found out that they couldn't teach and deliver bait, so they began experimenting with shipping worms in the mail. Weather largely dictates the harvest of night crawlers, as the job requires mild, damp nights with no moonlight or wind.
The process of picking night crawlers is definitely not a glamorous job. People have to go out after dark, take coffee cans, strap them to their legs. They have to get a miner's hat, dim it red, and they literally bend down, pick the worms, put them in the cans. Another thing about night crawlers is that they're really slimy, so they have to have sawdust on their fingers constantly. And also, night crawlers are very sensitive when it comes to light or vibrations, so which makes the moon or the wind very bad for them.
Once worms are harvested, they're cleaned and counted out to 500 a box, packed in rich and nutritious Michigan peat soil, then refrigerated in a massive cooler. In an effort to help protect the environment, DMF recently switched from traditional polypropylene containers to the first known compostable bait cup. DMF's live worms ship to national retail outlets like Cabela's, Dick's Sporting Goods, and Bass Pro. But fishermen may be surprised to learn that bait can also be bought at big box stores like Walmart, Kmart, and Meijer, as well as hundreds of convenience and hardware stores.
Walmart started selling DMF bait companies live bait in about 20 stores in 1991. Today, thousands of stores in 49 states sell millions of cups of worms, making it our #1 item in sporting goods.
By their nature, fishing worms draws repeat customers. That's the key to our success. Lures can get put back in a tackle box. Live bait cannot. That's why our motto is, our worms catch fish or die trying.
Yeah, you heard that tagline, our worms catch fish or die trying, which is kind of, yeah. So a lot of the videos that I've found to get the information are actually like from the source. There's not a ton of sources like of activists, talking about this stuff. So I just kind of did my best here with, what these companies provide as far as their information. And then I looked at some studies as well, and there have been studies conducted on worms, but a lot of times it just says worms. It doesn't specify like what kind of worm. There's several different kinds of worms, stuff like that. So I have some facts for you, but just, keep in mind that these might vary from species to species and that type of thing. So some species of worms can live for 4 to 10 years, but because they have many predators, they usually only live for 1 or 2. And worms do have a central nervous system, and they can feel pain. And, us as activists, usually when we're defending animals, we say, it's not necessarily their level of intelligence or anything like that. It's their ability to suffer. It's their ability to feel pain. That's like what really matters. And worms have that ability. They have the ability to suffer and have pain, you know, it might be in a different way from humans or other animals, but it is, they do have the ability to feel pain. They have two ganglia above their mouths on either side, and that connects to a nerve that runs along their length to motor neurons and sensory cells in each segment. And this really surprised me. Worms have developed a chemical system similar to that of a human to protect themselves from pain. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they feel pain in the same way that humans do or anything like that, but the chemical system is similar to us, which I find fascinating. Yeah, worms can double in population every 60 days due to their 27-day breeding cycle. So obviously, this makes selling worms very profitable because they can double in population in a couple months. So, oh, and I put a friendly reminder in here. If you see a worm on the pavement, put them in some grass or some soil, like out of the sun, so they don't roast up. And with minnows, I didn't put a ton of information on here because one of our mentors is going to talk about the sentience of fishes. So you'll get that a little bit later on. So I like to keep things about the animals in my activism, but I did think it was important here to include, because this impacts animals in a totally different way as well. And of course, the environment's important. Environmental impact of aquatic invasive species, or AIS. So non-native and invasive species introduction can cause ecological devastation and species extinction. This goes with like animals and plants. So, you know, a lot of people hate kudzu because it's a, you know, invasive species of plant. And it kind of works the same way with animals. Like if there's an animal that ends up in a lake that they're not native to, or in a, you know, or just in a segment of water, wherever it may be, that they're not supposed to be in, you know, that can wreak a lot of havoc and totally throw off the order of things, right? So this is these two quotes are from a study from Ohio State. Invasive species can be introduced to an ecosystem in a number of different ways: ballast water from ships, the exotic pet trade, and even habitat managers purposefully introducing a non-native species are sources of aquatic invasive species. One invasive pathway many people may inadvertently contribute to is the bait trade. When anglers, which is another word for like fishermen, buy live bait, it may contain other invasive species that can be released into the ecosystem. Preventing the spread of AIS through bait fish is further complicated since many states have different laws as to what constitutes as legal bait fish. So really the government doesn't really have it together on this either. And they would probably have a hard time enforcing it as well because, you know, I mean, a lot of these places that sell bait are just kind of like mom and pop backyard. There's a place, you know, probably not even 5 miles from where I live, and they sell bait just kind of out of their backyard. They've got like a little sign in the yard, you know, type of thing. And, you know, I mean, I doubt the cops are like, you know, checking in on them to make sure their bait is not a non-invasive species, you know, and stuff like that. So it can really get out of hand really quick. So let's leave animals alone, right? Because not only are we killing these aquatic animals that, or humans are killing these aquatic animals that they're hunting, such as, you know, different kinds of fishes and crabs and lobsters and sharks and, you know, whoever else. But all these, all these bait animals are dying. I mean, like billions of worms, billions of minnows, and who knows how many other animals that are used as bait. So we could spare an unfathomable number of them if we just didn't eat fish or other marine life. And a lot of you, I'm sure, have heard this statement from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. I'll read through it real quick. It's their position that appropriately planned vegan diets are healthful, nutritionally adequate, and may provide health benefits for the prevention and treatment of certain diseases. These diets are appropriate for all stages of life, including pregnancy, childhood, and for athletes. Plant-based diets are more environmentally sustainable than diets rich in animal products. Vegans are at a reduced risk of certain health conditions. So the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, for those of you that don't know, it's the largest group of nutritionists and dietitians in the world. They've got over 100,000 members, and they've put this statement together that vegan diets are perfectly suitable. So with that being said, there's really no justification for us to exploit worms, minnows, and the like, and then just to further exploit the fishes and other aquatic animals that we take out of the ocean, out of the lake, or out of the pond, or wherever we might be. So that is it for me. Hope that that was useful to you all. And I'm going to be turning it over now to Erica. I will let her introduce herself and get started. And if you have any questions for me, jot them down, and we'll get to them at the end. We'll do a Q&A, make sure we get to everybody's questions.
Sorry. Hello. I'm Erica, and I'm going to be talking about catch and release. And you see my screen? Yeah. So catch and release is obviously nothing like what happens in the episode of SpongeBob, where they're playing on the hooks. It is not fun and games, so we'll talk about that. So a little bit about me. Fish and marine life is one of my biggest passions. It's actually how I started in animal rights, I guess. My parents have always fished. We grew up on a boat, my brother and I, and they would fish every weekend, take the boat out. And for as long as I can remember, like I was 2, it always mortified me. Just watching them catch the fish, and the fish was clearly like suffering and struggling and wiggling around and suffocating to death, and I couldn't understand why my parents thought it was fun. I couldn't understand why nobody saw the suffering that I did, and it was the first time I'd ever seen suffering before, and it never got better. I always dreaded it every single time. I remember in preschool, I drew a picture of myself crying and my dad cutting up the fish, and I wrote, "Why did my dad take the blood out of the fish to eat it?" And my parents always thought I would like grow out of that phase, but here I am, full-time activist. But one thing that I didn't understand was the cruelty in catch and release. I used to crab, and I didn't understand how that could hurt the crab. My parents would explain that it's fun. It's like a little ride for them. My parents also used to fish for a little fish just for fun and then release them. And I would tolerate it. I'd be like, okay, I can watch this. It's fine. The fish isn't dying. I never did it myself, but I was okay with it. And I never understood that until later. So a lot of people don't understand that, the cruelty in catch and release, and people will stop eating fish and still keep fishing, or stop eating crabs and still keep crabbing and just releasing them. So I think this is an important topic to talk about, and I feel like a lot of people just don't understand that, even people who feel bad for fish. So what's wrong with catch and release? So fish actually suffer severe sociological stress, and this causes them to die of shock often. It doesn't always happen, but they can die just from the psychological impact of it. And when fish are handled by humans, they have a protective coating around their bodies, which allows them to basically hide from predators better. So as soon as we handle them, that protective coating on their bodies is damaged, and that makes them an easy target for predators. So even if they don't die from shock, they are a lot more susceptible to be eaten by other predators. Also, fish begin to suffocate as soon as they're taken out of the water, and their gills often collapse. Fish swim bladders can rupture because of sudden changes in pressure. And actually, researchers found that fish suffer from decompression sickness far more than humans do. So if you can imagine you being pulled out of the water like that, it's worse for a fish. A researcher even said that, in quotes, it's like the bends on steroids. So there's also the pain from the hook itself. So if you can imagine, we know fish are sentient. Fish feel pain in the same ways we do, in the same ways other animals do. So that hook through their mouth is the same as a hook through a mouth of a pig or a dog or us. So you can only imagine being stabbed in the face, the pain that they go through. They often also swallow the hooks. That happens pretty frequently, and the fisher will often have to go down their throat and grab the hook, and often guts and intestines come out with it, and they're often still alive during this process. They're also unable to eat due to mouth injuries because of the hook. Researchers have found that fish that were caught and released didn't have the same eating patterns that they had before. They often aren't able to eat because of it, and then they might die because of that. So it is very, very, very unlikely for a fish to survive after being released, whether it be from the stress, the shock, being pulled from the water, the decompression, the swim bladder collapsing, being able to eat, them being more susceptible to being eaten by other fish. There's just so much danger you're putting them in, and it makes their chances of survival like little to none. So basically it's the same as killing them. And that's all I have for now.
All right, thank you, Erica. Just a reminder to everyone, we are recording this workshop. We were planning on putting it on YouTube later for everyone to watch. Mikey's recording it, and he's got it on speaker view. So unless you unmute and talk, you shouldn't be on the recording. And if you want to ask a question during our Q&A session, if you don't want to be on camera for the recording or something, you can feel free to either drop something in the chat or turn your camera off or something like that. But all right, so thank you for that, Erica. Up next, we have Shannon. She's going to be talking about fishes that are factory farmed, and that is actually, at one point in time in my life, I was a pescatarian, or what Shannon would correct me and say a lacto-ovo-pesco-vegetarian. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, pesco-lacto-ovo.
Pesco-lacto-ovo-vegetarian, which basically meant I ate sea life, but not other animals. And before I knew about the dairy and egg industry, finding out about fish farms is what made me go vegetarian. So I'm passionate about this, and I can't wait to see what Shannon's got to say here. So Shannon, introduce yourself and take it away.
Hey everybody, I am Shannon, and a lot of people know me as Beacon Evans' mom, which I'm really proud of. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about this. And I know that it was covered a bit during the video at the beginning, but I do want to make sure that everybody really does understand that these individuals do feel pain. Fishes are definitely, like I said, individuals for sure, and they have the abilities to do a lot more than many humans tend to give them credit for. And unlike Erica, who just told a really awesome story about how she just knew from such a young age, most of us don't, and I didn't. And interestingly, even though I stopped eating animals, including fish, when I was 9 years old, I really didn't give them much merit. And we're just taught tons of lies about fish. Some of the most common ones are that they have 3 or 10-second memories. They're stupid. They don't feel pain. They don't know how to think, and so many other common misconceptions like that. And remember, fish don't have eyebrows. They don't have the ability, most of them don't have the ability to make facial expressions, not ones that we can easily understand at least. So it's pretty easy for us to believe all of these lies, especially since most of us already, believe similar lies about animals that are much more obviously like us. Gorillas, cows, pigs, mammals. These sea animals are a lot different than us, noticeably, visibly. But of course, in all the ways that matter, when we look deep down, they're the same as everybody else. So, like I said, if I'm going to be completely honest, even after I'd stopped eating animals when I was 9, I really didn't give them much merit. And it was my son, Vegan Evan, who really helped me to learn a lot more about fish when he was just 4 years old. And we read a lot of articles together about them having friends and feeling pain. And once I'd learned more about them and I used my common sense that I already had, then I really did realize they were just like all the other animals that we speak up for and that we do our best to protect. And unfortunately, they don't receive the same amount of protection or even an equal amount of our voices, because it's just such a tough fight as it is. And I think that we realize that it is a lot easier for the average person to connect with the cows and the pigs. And it's really tough for them to connect with the chickens and the turkeys, and it's even tougher for them to connect with the sea life. But they are the vast majority of the animals that are being killed. And the commercial fishing and the fish farming that I'm about to talk about are responsible for claiming the lives of trillions of individuals every year. So many individuals that they're not even counted in numbers, they're measured in tons. And before we go on, does anybody real quick want to go back to school and tell me how many pounds are in a ton? Don't worry if you guess wrong, it's okay. Any guesses? Are they in the chat? Okay, I'll just tell you. It's like 2,000. Yes, there we go. Ryan got it. All right, so 2,000 pounds. That's a lot of pounds, and we're talking about literally, trillions of tons of individuals. So, all right. So first off, I am going to go ahead and talk about the commercial fishing. So according to fishfuel.org, which is an amazing resource, globally, an estimated 1 to 3 trillion wild caught fishes are killed commercially for food each year. And hundreds of millions more are killed for sport each year. And of course, the numbers vary, but the farmed fishes account for hundreds of billions to possibly up to half of all the fish consumed worldwide. So I like to note that different sources do have different numbers, especially concerning fish and sea life, because again, they are often measured by weight rather than the individuals that they are. So Approximately 1/4 of all the animals that are used for research and education in North America now are also fish. And additionally, about 1.5 billion are used for aquariums. And also you have to, we're not going to get into it in too much depth, but you have to think about just how extensively we are, using and exploiting these animals in all different ways. Yeah, the majority of the commercial fishing is being done for food, but all of these exotic fish that we see in aquariums, a vast majority of them are caught in the wild in their homes, because these aren't animals, the ones that come from the ocean, at least, they're not animals that are easy to breed in captivity. Freshwater fish that are in aquariums, yes, they're often farmed. However, the ones from the ocean are going to be taken from their homes, which is sad too. Okay, but back to the commercial fishing. So just imagine, some of you may have seen back in the day shows like Whale Wars that were popular, and a lot of you probably do know about Sea Shepherd, but from seeing shows and clips like that, we've gotten a glimpse of what some of these ships look like. They're massive. They are the size of football fields, and they can stay out in the ocean, out in the open sea for months. And they can store thousands of tons of fishes. And I say fishes intentionally because, yes, they're individuals. And there's nothing fair or natural about this. This is being done on a mass scale, and it's not necessary. And the way that it's being done is just depleting everything. There was a really great example in the documentary Cowspiracy, I believe it was, which I'm sure many of you have seen, where it showed how these giant nets, they just go and they take every single individual in their path. It's not just the certain fish that they're looking to catch. In addition, there's a lot of bycatch and I don't really like these terms, of course. They're industry terms, but bycatch and bykill, that are other animals that are not the target, not the goal species, that are caught up in these giant nets or hooks, and not even used, just thrown back, either totally dead or with giant gaping holes, pulled, through different pressures that they're not meant to be pulled through before being thrown back in the ocean to just suffer usually a slow, painful death. So a lot of the time also there's really expensive tracking equipment being used. So again, nothing fair or natural about this. And the fact that it's all unnecessary just makes it insane. Now, I got some great information from PETA, which is really easy for everybody to find if you'd like to look more into this. But some of the most common methods of fishing are going to be long lines, gill nets, and these are, again, ginormous operations. The long lines are one of the most widespread methods, and the ships unreel up to 50 miles of line with hundreds of thousands of hooks. The hooks are baited and they're dragged behind the boat. And depending on who they're trying to catch, it will depend on what depth that these giant nets are left at, or these lines, and they'll keep them afloat using buoys, sometimes overnight. And once hooked, some animals will drown or bleed to death in the water. Others struggle until the boat will come back to reel them in, which could take many hours, where they're just suffering. And that's why at the beginning I wanted to talk about that, the fact that we do need to remember that these are sentient individuals, and they do suffer the same way that cats and dogs and cows and pigs do, because even though it's not as easy for us to see, their suffering is immense. And these larger fish like swordfish and yellow tuna, which can weigh hundreds of pounds, they're probably not going to die as easily. When they get reeled into the boats, they're actually having pickaxes dug into their faces and gouging them until, you know, they're able to get them aboard. And again, these practices will kill other animals. Some of those animals are going to be dolphins, sea turtles, sharks, and from the research I've done in the past, again, the numbers can always vary, so please look up the most accurate and up-to-date before giving numbers out when you're speaking with people during outreach. But according to Cowspiracy Facts, it is about 5 pounds of by-kill, by-catch per pound of fish that humans consume. And with shrimp, it's even much worse. I've seen numbers as bad as 15 pounds per pound of shrimp. And so for people, even if, you know, hopefully everyone will one day just be able to understand that all these individuals have the ability to suffer and feel pain and understand that that matters and they deserve a right to their lives. But in the meantime, this is destroying the planet, and our oceans are on track to be fishless by 2048 because of these practices. The gill nets that I mentioned a few minutes ago, they range from 300 feet to 7 miles in length. They're weighted at the bottom and they're held upright by floats at the top. And they've been termed the walls of death. Fish aren't able to see the netting and they get stuck. They try to back out, catches them by their gills or their fins, which is really terrifying if you can imagine. Many suffocate, others struggle so desperately that they bleed to death. These can be left unmonitored for days, so fish can be trapped and just suffer for, you know, much longer than some of the other methods that are usually checked and dealt with daily. There are many other methods of commercial fishing. There's the bottom trawlers, which of course are responsible for just, you know, ruining the floors of the ocean. And there are documentaries out, luckily, that are talking about that, with the devastation to the coral reefs and all. So these are huge environmental issues as well, of course, but what we're focusing on here are the fish, the trillions of individuals who get kind of forgotten about and not given as much merit as many of the other animals. So slaughter on deck is another thing that PETA mentions. And if the fish are alive at the end of whatever method was used to catch them, they are going to be killed on deck, or the other case would be that they'd just be put on ice, which I'm sure many of us have either seen in person or video live markets where fish are still live on ice. So that would be the other scenario, which, you know, in these situations, I don't know what's worse. But the fact, again, that it's all unnecessary is just, you know, we shouldn't have to figure out which is less awful, or it's all bad. It's all really bad. So now fish farms are, you know, these animals are now spending their entire lives in cramped enclosures that are disease ridden. They're filthy. There's parasites and infections everywhere. It's terrifying, depending on where they are and what type of fish or animals they are. Situations vary. Trey's going to play a video for us right now so that you can see a glimpse of what these aqua farms look like. Were we ready for that, Trey? Okay, here we go. And Trey, if you could just make sure to unmute yourself, and I'm going to mute myself.
Yep. Use your discretion on this video, everybody. It's more graphic than the one that we were watching earlier. So
They just suffocate. This too. It's so rough. Over the years, you kind of get desensitized. Fungus ate away his face.
This compassion over killing investigation is the first of its kind, bringing you inside the cruel and unnatural world of salmon aquaculture. Every year, hundreds of millions of fish are raised in these filthy underwater cages. Fish are sensitive, intelligent animals. Many use tools and even recognize themselves in mirrors. Their pain sensors are remarkably similar to ours. In fact, our ability to feel pain is likely derived from one of our fish-like ancestors. As fish scientist Becca Franks has concluded, the science on fish sentience is clear. Fish have the capacity to suffer and feel pain. This facility is owned by Cook Aquaculture, whose subsidiary, True North, has partnered with Martha Stewart for its seafood brand. This single hatchery raises millions of salmon every year. Conditions are so filthy that fish are vaccinated to prevent the spread of disease. But the salmon are not properly anesthetized first. They thrash around as the workers try to inject them with needles.
Once the needles in them and they walk down here, vaccinate instructions are probably. It takes us all to die off. So once you vaccinate, it takes them like a week before they stop eating again.
Workers will also cut off parts of the salmon's sensitive fins as a way to identify them. On farms like this one, fish who are deemed no longer profitable are thrown away like trash, tossed in buckets. They're left to slowly suffocate or are crushed to death by other fish.
They just suffocate. This too. It's so rough. Over the years, you kind of get desensitized.
In just a single day, COK documented hundreds of fish being thrown during the sorting process. Imagine if this was any other animal, a chicken or a dog. From the moment they're hatched, these sentient animals are routinely treated like inanimate objects. Overcrowded and underfed, the salmon's short lives are filled with suffering.
If the fish aren't fed enough, they'll actually think a little pupil of the other fish is food, and they'll come after them and they'll peck the eye. You happen to see some missing eyeballs, that's the reason.
Salmon die at this facility at extremely high numbers. The dirty living conditions create the perfect environment for fungus and parasites, which grow in clumps on eggs and fish. Here, fungus is eating away at the faces of these fish.
They get like lesions and stuff from the fungus that kind of eats away at them, and then they start bleeding from that.
The fish who survive these putrid and unnatural conditions are then transported to another location where they will finish growing to be slaughtered for human consumption.
Okay, so thank you so much, Trey. So I think that's a pretty good glimpse of what these places look like. And I just want to highlight how much they're like the other factory farms in a lot of ways. So just a couple things to note that I think for those of us who speak a lot about the farmed animals, these might be some easier points to remember because they are so similar. So to increase profits, fish farmers cram as many fish as possible into the smallest amount of space possible. And kind of like the chicken barns, tens of thousands of fish can be crowded onto a single farm. large farms can span the size of several football fields and contain over 1 million fish. And this is great information that, again, came from PETA. And another thing that's very similar to the factory farms with land animals is that the smaller fish are bullied and killed by larger ones. There's some interesting things that are done in attempts to prevent this. They're continually sorting fish, and they have different ways of doing that. One of the really weird ways that's not nice is they just dump them, and there's like basically bars that have different size holes, and so the smaller fish would only be able to fall through certain holes, and so this way it prevents the smaller ones from getting bullied and killed, and it helps for them to be more profitable, because that's all that matters. Another similarity is the high mortality and disease rates, of course. The deformities, things like that, are very common. Stress-related injuries. Many of the fish are blind. It's said that on some farms up to 40%. And this can happen very often when the fish are not fed properly, or when they're just in a frenzy and constantly trying to eat, and they pluck out other people's eyes. Well, just like the factory farms don't need to care so much about the well-being of the cows and the pigs and the chickens, because they're just raising them for their weight in flesh. Same thing here. Blind fish are worth just as much money to the fish farmers, so they don't care. It's not about their well-being or how well adjusted they are, or how healthy they are. It's just, can we try and keep them alive until it's time to murder them? And another similarity is that there's just not many regulations to ensure any humane treatment, which we know there's no humane way to do any of this anyway, but there's really just no regulations in place. And many of the farmed fish die long before it's time for them to be slaughtered. It's said that that's nearly 40%, which again is very similar to the land animals. Many of them, they send the workers through the chicken and the pig barns every morning to get rid of everybody who didn't make it since the night before, or anybody who looks weak. That's not going to bring them enough money. Similar practices here. Get out whoever died, get rid of the runts or anybody who looks like they're not going to make it or spread disease. And then again, when it's time to slaughter, similar practices, which include suffocating fish, like we talked about earlier, sometimes keeping them on the ice, leaving them to endure that pain and suffering. I used to work at Bonefish for years, Bonefish Grill, and at one point we started having the live Maine lobster coming in, and we sold lobster tails year round, which was upsetting, as was basically every other animal we sold. But the live Maine lobsters was especially upsetting, because I knew that they were just suffocating in the walk-in cooler. They're an animal that's supposed to be in the water, and they were just slowly, painfully suffocating to death until someone that worked with me was gonna stick a skewer up their body while they were still alive. So just terrible things, obviously, but the things that they endure, and again, they're not given any merit, because most of us animal lovers a lot of the time just don't give them enough merit, because there's just not, we don't have the proper information, and we're just told so many lies for so long, is what I would basically chalk that up to. But another issue is, sorry, am I okay still for another minute or two? Okay, a lot of information here. Many species of farmed fish are not fish that eat plants. They're carnivorous fish that have to eat other fish, which means we have to do more fishing in our oceans, which are already in bad shape. And I think I might have already mentioned it, but the oceans are on track to be fishless by 2048 because of overfishing. Another interesting thing is that the fish farmers, the aqua farmers, they've begun to feed fish oil and fish meal to fish who are naturally plant eaters in order to try to make them grow faster. And that uses actually a huge amount of the fish meal and fish oil supply that is consumed at all. Another thing is that, again, similarly to the land animals, the fish farmers are lacing feed with antibiotics and chemicals. And that's in, an effort to try and help their profits once again by keeping more fish from contracting diseases and illnesses and dying. So I'm just about done here. I'm going to read a couple interesting facts from the Cowspiracy Facts website concerning the oceans, which you can find all the sources there. And I think somebody already put it in the chat earlier for me, which was awesome. And then we're going to do a really quick exercise, and then I'll be done. So again, these are Cowspiracy Facts website. 3/4 of the world's fisheries are exploited or depleted. We could see those fishless oceans by 2048. So if anybody wants to see, there are 3 sources there on the website for that. And about 2.7 trillion animals are pulled from the ocean each year, according to these sources here. But again, we do have to measure in tons because of the numbers. And there is also the source about the unintended marine species that are caught and discarded as bykill. And on here it is showing that for every pound, up to 5 pounds of bykill. And there's some more great ones on here. People who might not be vegan yet or that are still eating certain sea life, they do typically care about whales and dolphins and other sea turtles and seals. So sometimes it's helpful to know things like this. The scientists estimate that as many as 650,000 whales, dolphins, and seals are killed every year by fishing vessels alone. But yes, more great stuff on there. And as long as I get the okay, we are going to do an exercise real quick. We're going to be splitting up into 4 different groups. So I'll be leading one of the groups. Trey will be leading one. Erica and Peyton will be leading the other 2. And we will each have a secret task. I still have to tell Peyton what hers is. Sorry. And then once we're in our groups, we're basically just going to listen to the mentor in the group and follow the instructions. We're going to come up with our own scenarios. So yeah, this is an empathy exercise, and then we're going to come back together really quick, and we're just going to do a little game for a few seconds. Okay, so Mikey, if you are ready, you can split us up. Trey, Peyton, and Erica, look in the chat for a private message from me. Peyton, yours is coming. Erica and Trey, yours is already there. Oh boy, I think it took me away from being able to message Peyton, and now I just have to call her so fast. All right, sorry. Okay, so basically what we're going to be doing here is we are going to be coming up with a couple scenarios, what it would be like if we're going to come up with 3 different scenarios. If you were an animal raised on a fish farm is going to be the first one. So you guys start talking about that and just pick one particular animal and what their life was like.
Are we like among the fish or like
You're going to pick one particular animal that was raised on the fish farm and what your life was like from start to finish.
that would be very stinky.
And I just have to call Peyton. I'll be right back.
Okay.
So it sounds pretty miserable being crammed in a small space with tons of other fish and injected with vaccines and not being in your natural environment.
I agree. But on the other hand, they might be I might feel educated because I'm always in a school. Get it? Fish are always
Yeah. Dirty water, I guess, swimming in, I don't know how well their filtration systems are, but I would think, wouldn't be close to the ocean or lakes. There's a lot more water to dissipate.
no quiet time.
The diseases.
Okay, guys, I am back. And sorry, I had been muted, so I didn't hear what happened yet. Okay. Did we come up with any ideas yet, or are we confused?
No, Debbie was saying that it would be very cramped and dirty.
Yeah. And just possibility of diseases.
And then use that frog for bait, like put the hook through the bottom of their jaw there. So you could be a frog that's used for bait. And I think when we get back to the main room, we'll be sharing that experience. So, hey, Mikey, just to let you know, I think we're going to be ready in just a minute. Do y'all have any questions about that?
It's making me think, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's like Shannon said, it's an empathy exercise. So
yeah, it's making me feel. I don't know. It's hard to describe, though. That's a whole other part of it.
Well, yeah.
But to feel what they feel, I mean, I can absolutely put myself in their place and I can feel it. It's hard to put it into human words, but.
Yeah. And it's like a lot of people say in their outreach, like one of the things that sucks most about being one of these animals that's exploited is the confusion. Like they don't understand what's going on. Like they don't even have a mental grasp. Like, oh, people want to use my body for this, or and they're selling it. That's why they're doing it. Like they don't even understand that. So yeah, the element of confusion. Like, why are you being taken out of your natural habitat? Like, why are you all of a sudden in this room on this conveyor belt, some other species?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So Mikey said we've got about 2 minutes. So y'all can I'll shut up for a minute and let y'all take that time to just kind of reflect and do this empathy exercise. And Felix, even though your mic's not working, you can feel free to do the empathy exercise with one of these animals. And yeah, so I'll be quiet for a minute and let y'all reflect on that.
What grocery store?
Super H Mart.
Is that a real thing?
Yeah, it's like a big Asian grocery store.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we could just say
Okay,
Kroger or Publix and keep it simple.
Okay.
Oh, Mikey says it's a super
Yeah.
awesome Asian grocery store.
Is that what it's called? Okay.
It's called Super H Mart. Yeah.
Love H Mart. Okay. We'll just choose Super H Mart. Okay, so we ended up in Super H Mart. And we, you know, typical, I guess we got bought and boiled alive, right? That's what happens to most lobsters. Okay, so that's the first depressing storyline. Now let's come up with a scenario where we're a wild-caught lobster. We were taken from our home, and now we're in Super H Mart, and somebody comes and saves us. So who wants to be the activist that comes and saves us?
I can volunteer. So
awesome.
I was going to volunteer you for us.
Okay, well, you and Lee, you guys, Ryan and Lee are the dynamic duo that busted into Super H Mart and freed us. What's our name, real quick? We have like 30 seconds.
Larry.
Actually, Lee and Ryan, come up with a name because you name us.
Larry and there's two. We have two lobsters, or
no? I don't know.
How many lobsters are we? Just one lobster?
How many do you got? You guys eat. You guys get two since you are two people.
Oh my gosh. I call dibs on Larry.
Mo.
I'm gonna say Mo. Great. Okay, and then what do you guys do with Larry and Mo? Do you release them or do you find a sanctuary?
Hey, Shannon. Hey, guys.
Hey, Sarah.
Hey, Mikey. All right. So I know that wasn't exactly related to commercial fishing and fish farming. Some of the groups may have had more of that feel, but that was an empathy exercise that I just think is really important. We're going to share really quickly, but the reason that I wanted us to do this is because with sea life, with fish in particular, one of the most effective ways that I've found to talk to people and to get them to understand is really to just use these type of empathy statements and what if stories and can you imagine type stories. So first, I'm gonna ask Jyoti from my group to share the life of this individual, and then somebody else from another group, whoever wants to, can just tell us where you think that this individual came from, where they lived, Okay, go ahead, Jyoti.
So I was born in this crammed area. I call this my favorite pond, and there were so many of us crammed in over there. We were like sleeping on top of each other, besides each other, always getting into each other's business. There's no room for specializing. It was CRAP everywhere and also CARP everywhere. Just a lot of algae blooms, a lot of solids, biomass, medicines, antibiotics, very little purification, and just crammed, and more people come in and feel very suffocated, and a lot of algae bloom, and everybody's having one disease or another, and just can't move in, so dirty, can't see, can't move around, just basically crammed in and just waiting to be put out of our misery.
Thank you, Jyoti. Michelle guessed you're a minnow. That's a really good guess. Yeah, at farmed fish, exactly. Yeah. So for an animal raised in any type of a farm or factory farm or any type of setting, including us human animals, our reality is what our reality is. So they might not know that, you know, they're not supposed to be born into a factory farm. They don't know that they were supposed to be in the ocean or a river or a pond or a lake or wherever they're meant to be. But the reality is the reality. So we have to get people to imagine what it would be like to be them. So good guesses, guys. Does anybody from another group want to give one of your scenarios of somebody's life? And whoever wants to go. Okay, cool. Michelle, go ahead.
All right. Here's life from the point of view of this being. So I'm deep inside the earth. All of a sudden, something large and stronger than me grabs me and yanks me out of the earth. I'm jostled and I'm flung and I'm disoriented. And now I'm with thousands of others just like me, and I can't breathe and I'm confused and scared. And now I'm placed in a cold place. I've never felt cold like this before, and I'm cold and it's strange and I'm confused and I'm shocked and stunned and I'm stressed and scared. And then I feel something sharp pierce me right through my body, and the pain is searing and unbearable. The pain is throughout my entire body, and I try to get away. I wiggle and I try to get away, but I can't. And the pain spreads. I feel like I'm dying, and then I'm dunked into the water and I can't breathe, and it's even more confusing and I'm terrified. Does anybody want to guess? Yeah, someone got it.
Yeah, Marion got it.
Worm. I'm a worm. Sad.
Yeah, it's pretty I don't think I've ever heard these described without me knowing who that was. And I think it's kind of reminds me of an exercise I remember hearing where like you're supposed to describe something as if it's a human being happening, that something happening to a human being, and then you find out later on it was a cow or a pig. And this kind of seems similar, like you would never normally think that somebody was describing a worm just now, and to them that's their life, so that's really important. All right, that was really great, Michelle. Does anybody else want to go from another group? If not, we can move on.
I can share what my group did.
Okay, cool.
So we had a couple beings with two very different outcomes. So the first is really typical. So these two individuals were lobsters who lived off the coast of Maine, Chesapeake Bay to be exact. And they were caught up by fishermen one day, and they had bands put around our claws, and then we were dunked in a tank on top of a bunch of different lobsters in a supermarket. And we just sat there on top of each other, really stressed out and upset until one day somebody came and paid for our bodies, and we went home with them, and they put us in a pot of boiling water while we were still alive. And our last moments on earth were nothing but pain and suffering. It was the worst pain imaginable to be boiled alive. We could fully feel everything. An interesting thing about lobsters is they have a central nervous system, but not an autonomic nervous system. So an autonomic nervous system is responsible for the feeling of shock. So, you know, if a human being, we have an autonomic nervous system. So if we're in an extremely traumatic, like physically injuring event, like we have a limb cut off or we're shot or stabbed or something, we go into shock so we don't feel it. Lobsters are not capable of going into shock, so they fully feel every sensation that's happening to them. So they fully feel being boiled alive. So that's a very, very typical outcome for a lobster in our world, which is extremely depressing and sad. But there, in an alternate universe, something else happened to us. So we were still caught, taken from our home in Chesapeake Bay, and we still ended up in the same supermarket, Super H Mart to be exact, on top of a bunch of other lobsters. We still had a very, very uncomfortable time until two activists come into the supermarket, Ryan and Lee, and they see that me and my friend Lobster are suffering. We're having a terrible time on top of all these other lobsters. And they beg the management to save our lives. They plead with them, and that manager is having a very good day. So he released me and my friend to Lee and Ryan, and Lee and Ryan gave us names, Larry and Mo. And they took us into their care, drove us all the way back up to Maine to our home, and they released us back into the waters. And we saw some of our friends who weren't captured and who weren't put in the supermarket. We saw some of our family members, and we lived a very, very long life. Lobsters can live to be over 100 years old. And we had a little bit of, a traumatic experience being pulled from our home, but thanks to these wonderful animal liberation activists, we're returned to our home and we lived out the rest of our very, very long, fulfilling lives. So that's it.
Oh, thank you guys all so much for participating. I hope that everybody, even though it wasn't completely on my topic, I hope you got a lot out of that little exercise. It was short, only 6 minutes, because otherwise, all right, bye guys.
All right, thank you so much, Shannon. Yeah, that exercise was definitely eye-opening, and thanks for everything on the commercial fishing and the factory farm fishing. I mean, it's all a lot of crazy information. It's just crazy how far the exploitation goes. So all this stuff is like kind of heavy, right? But I promise y'all at the end, we're gonna talk about how we can change the world for these animals and what we can do. So hang in there for that. So up next, I'm thrilled to introduce Peyton. She's gonna talk about alternatives to fishing and food alternatives and companion animals and sentience and a personal story. So I'll let Peyton introduce herself and throw it to her.
Hello, everybody. You just heard from me. So my name is Peyton, and I'm going to be talking to you guys about a few different topics relating to marine life today. First off, to build off of what Shannon was saying about the horrible, horrible conditions that fish are farmed in, unfortunately, the conditions for fish farmed for the pet industry is not much better. So one of the most common fish sold in pet stores today are betta fish. So betta fish are bred either, or just depending on the different types of species, because there's many different species of betta fish. They're caught in the wild, so they're taken from their homes. So either they're taken from their homes, bred in warehouses, and then shipped to retailers in teeny tiny plastic bags filled with only a few ounces of water. So as you can imagine, being shoved in a plastic bag with just a few inches of water is extremely traumatic, and then being shipped, either driven across states or even flown out to a retailer, is extremely traumatic and upsetting. So they often have a blue tinted, like tranquilizing liquid put into the water to keep them sedated and reduce agitation. And it's extremely disorienting for these fish. It's similar to when beekeepers go into the beehive and they put that smoke into the beehive to tranquilize them and trance them. That's the same kind of effect that happens to these betta fish. And that lasts for the entirety that they're in the water. And this is standard practice for any and all retailers, from a small pet store to Petco or Walmart. And and when they arrive at the retailers, these conditions really don't get much better. I'm sure, as we're all familiar with going into either a pet store or Walmart or any place that sells betta fish, they're just in these tiny plastic cups with no water filtration, no oxygenation or heat. And betta fish in particularly, they are tropical fish, so they need water heaters to survive and to thrive. If they're kept in too cold of water, they can die. And if they're kept at, even room temperature water, they can get really sick, and that can lead to long-term damages or even death. And I have a short video just to kind of show you guys exactly how traumatic these conditions that they're put under are. So whenever you're ready, Trey, if you want to show that, it's about 1.5 minutes long.
These boxes are filled with betas. You can see they're kept in these very, very small bags. I mean, it's ridiculous how small these are. Some of these are actually dead. This is definitely dead. It's just, I don't know how they're expected to live in bags this small.
All right, so that was just an illustration of the conditions that they're kept in, shipped in. And a lot of people, might think that fish, they don't need like luxurious or even like decent conditions to be shipped in because they're not really sentient. They can't really comprehend what condition they're in. But I'm going to tell you a few things that kind of dispel those myths about fish, having like 3 10-second memories, or that they're not sentient. They don't understand what's happening. They're just like sea vegetables. I've heard people even refer to them as. So a few anecdotes. Aquatic vets have actually reported that their patients, their fish patients, learning their voices, their footsteps, or even their scrubs if they wear a uniform every time they visit their patients, actually recognizing them and greeting them in a unique way from their human caregiver. So they learn the, be it footsteps, appearance of this person, their voice, and they know who they are. They greet them in a unique way. Fish can learn feeding schedules, and a lot of them, some fish, different species, are capable of learning a schedule within a week or so. And if any of you have ever had fish as companion animals, you might recognize this, that every time it's around that time, they'll either swim around, get really excited, or run up to the opening where you drop the food. So they're actually learning a schedule, which wouldn't be possible if they only had a 10-second memory. You can't, learn a schedule if your mind resets every 10 seconds. And another anecdote, so the show Mythbusters actually did a test where they put fish through a maze made from a series of hoops. And of course, we would call that exploitation, but it did show something pretty interesting. So this maze made from series of hoops, where the end goal was to find food pellets. The fish learned how to do this in just a matter of hours. So they would learn which hoops to swim through to get the food pellets, and then they would just keep doing that. So that does show a pattern of learning. And of course, that would be exploitation, and we could easily observe those same findings out in the wild. But this is just that's a show that's on the air, reaching the average consumer who isn't necessarily concerned about animal rights. So that's something interesting I wanted to point out. And then in the video that we did in the intro by Earthling Ed, he mentioned a person named Dr. Cullum Brown. who actually, so Dr. Brown literally wrote the book on fish cognition. In 2006, he wrote a book called Fish Cognition, and he's one of the most accomplished researchers of fish cognition today. And he says, fish perception and cognitive abilities often match or exceed other vertebrates. In fact, fish have a high degree of behavioral plasticity and compare favorably to humans and other terrestrial vertebrates across a range of intelligence tests. So basically what that means is behavioral plasticity means that fish can learn behavior and they can adapt their behaviors. So they have a wide range of behaviors that they're able to learn and produce. And across a wide range of intelligence tests, they compare favorably to humans, to us. So their intelligence compares to us on a significant level of intelligence, of sentience, of cognition, which is incredibly interesting and goes against everything that we're taught about fish, especially goldfish and betta fish, fish sold as pets or companion animals today. He also notes that, of course, fish feel pain, as we've all reiterated. He says it would be impossible for fish to survive as the cognitively and behaviorally complex animals that they are without a capacity to feel pain. The article that I'm quoting, I'll drop in the chat after I'm done with my spiel. It's very, very interesting. It's an interview, a long form interview with Dr. Brown. And, oh, God. Sorry, guys, my setup collapsed. So it's a long form interview with Dr. Brown. And he's got a lot to say about how intelligent fish are and their cognitive abilities. So I definitely think that's worth a read for you guys who like to read. Moving on to our next topic. So fishing and food alternatives. So a lot of people really, really enjoy fishing. So as somebody who grew up in the South, I grew up fishing. A lot of my friends grew up fishing. This is something that maybe they did every single weekend. As Erica mentioned, she did. It can be, really ingrained in generations and cultures. So that is something that as a vegan, talking to other people, doing outreach, you'll come across people who say that. So it's really important and useful to be to know how to respond to those people who say, this is a part of my culture, my family, whatever. So what I like to do is first ask them to identify what it is about fishing that they enjoy, right? There's multiple different aspects of fishing. Is it, the bonding time with the loved one that they enjoy? Is it being in nature, being on the water, that sense of relaxation? I've even heard people say they really love the sense of reward or accomplishment that they get. They've been sitting out in their boat all day and they finally, hook a fish through the mouth and rip them out of the water. And that brings them a sense of accomplishment. Or maybe it's even interacting with living creatures. I've heard people say they really enjoy interacting with creatures in a primal way. So those are some of the most common responses about why people enjoy fishing that I've heard. So ask them to identify, really what is it about fishing? If it's that bonding time with a loved one, so these are some alternatives that you can recommend to them for the hobby of fishing. So if it's that bonding time with a loved one that they really enjoy, maybe they grew up doing it with their father, older brother, family member, or just a good childhood friend, just plain and simple, do something else that doesn't involve killing somebody as bonding time. There are an infinite amount of fun activities you can do with your family that don't involve ripping somebody out of their home, stabbing them in the face, cutting them open and taking their guts out. There's a ton of activities that don't involve that. Maybe if it's the only thing that you and your loved one have in common, this would be a great opportunity to learn a new hobby together. Maybe teach them something that they don't know, or ask them to teach you something that you don't know. Learn a new activity. If it's being in nature that you enjoy, just do another nature activity. Go on a hike, walk, drive, camp, just get out in a kayak. There are plenty of things to do in nature that don't involve killing somebody. If it's that they like being on the water, just be on the water without killing someone. Like being on a boat, you can be on the boat, drink a beer, and chat with your friends without killing somebody. If it is that sense of reward or accomplishment that I've heard a couple people say that they really, really enjoy, there are a few activities in nature that kind of mimic that. So bird watching and photography are two that came to mind for me. finding and identifying new species of birds through observation, not interacting with them or their habitat in any way. That can be a really rewarding thing. Or staying in nature, you know, with your camera, waiting for the lighting to get right, and finally being able to catch that perfect shot can be extremely rewarding. And this can also be an opportunity for you and your loved one to learn a new skill together, or for you to learn a new skill together, you know, bird watching, photography, to get that sense of accomplishment. And if they try to tell you, you know, oh, it's like these hobbies are expensive, which they kind of are, but so is fishing equipment. So just sell all your fishing equipment and buy a camera or a pair of binoculars or some bird watching books. There is an alternative to everything. If it is that interacting with living creatures that I've heard some people say, again, nature photography, bird watching are great ways to interact with nature, where you're not actually interfering or taking away from the environment or taking someone's life. Also, you can go to a sanctuary. And if you're a vegan and you're trying to talk to your family member or a loved one about, you know, why we shouldn't fish, going to a sanctuary would be a great opportunity to kind of talk about animal rights and show them some of the survivors. Another activity is scuba diving. Great way to interact with living creatures without, you know, touching them or interacting with their environment. Also a great way to be in nature. So those are some alternatives to the hobby of fishing. And then there's the food aspect, right? So people eat the fish that they murder. And of course, I mean, there are a ton of vegan fish replacements in the supermarket. I have another link that I'll drop in the chat after I'm done with this the spiel of prepackaged fish alternatives. Gardein has one. If any of you guys actually know of any, I would love to hear about them in the question and answer portion at the end of this, just to kind of throw some out there. Maybe we haven't heard of some. Also, a recipe that I saw for like interesting fish-like texture would be like tofu. So you cut it and then lace it with nori, kind of, you know, nori is like dried seaweed, and then you just bread it and fry it like you do fish. There are plenty of food alternatives to fish. Actually, so this is kind of a dual point to the hobby and the food alternatives. The act of mushroom hunting. So if you do it, if you really enjoy that act of you know, catching fish, sitting there waiting, that reward, mushroom hunting is also extremely rewarding, because you're like foraging. You can also do this with like edible plants. There are also some species of mushroom that make fantastic food fish replacements. So you're getting your hobby, and then you get to go home and eat the plant that you found, and you don't have to take anybody's life or stab anybody in the face, which I think is amazing. And you still, you know, get to spend that time with a loved one. You get to be in nature. I mean, you can't go wrong with mushroom hunting and eating edible plants. And so I'll drop that link to all the food alternatives in the chat after this. I have one more topic I want to cover. So talking about, I touched on this with the little breakout group that we did of animal liberation. So that's what we all want to achieve, right? And a great way that we can do that and save lives in our own lives are liberating fish from pet stores and having them as companion animals. So if any of you guys have ever gone into a pet store or a Walmart and you've seen, you know, fish in tanks crammed in there, betta fish in those little cups, it's absolutely heartbreaking. And you just wish you could take them out of there. And as when I very first went vegan, before I understood all the intricacies of you know, industries and you shouldn't pay for them, I used to go to Walmart and buy betta fish, and I had tanks everywhere, and I would you know, take them and put them in a much bigger tank. Of course, I don't advocate for that now, because you're paying for that fish, you're commodifying them, and then that just, you know, puts money back into the industry. So we don't want to do that. So I want to talk to you guys about how to negotiate the release of a fish from a pet store. Before you do that, you want to have a few materials on hand. So you want to have, at the very, very minimum, a 10-gallon tank per fish. So fish deserve about 10 gallons per individual in a tank. So they need a large room to swim around, Bowls and small tanks, those are a no-go. Those are horrible for fish. I mean, they're very complex cognitive creatures. They get very bored easily, swimming in circles. That's no life for a fish of any kind. So you want to have at the very least a 10-gallon tank, water filter, fish food, a water heater if you'll be like liberating betta fish or other tropical species of fish. And then you want to have like a bubbler or an oxygenator to get the oxygen back in the water, because water in a tank can become very stagnant. And then you want to have things that your fish can interact with in the tank. So ceramic logs or hidey holes for the fish to go in, just stimulation, like plants. They're called silk plants. They're not actually made of silk. That's just what they're called, not the plastic kinds. Okay, so those are some of the materials you want to have on hand. And then once you've got your setup done at home, and you go into the pet store and you're looking for an individual to liberate. You want to find, so this is kind of a little messed up, but you want to find a sick individual or somebody who looks like they're not doing so well. You're just going to have better luck negotiating the release of somebody who looks like they might already be dead. So those are the ones you're going to have the best luck with. Then you want to go to a manager. Store employees don't have the type of authority to release animals, so just go to a manager, save yourself some time. Also, pro tip, don't be afraid to get emotional, especially if you're a young woman. Whatever you can do to make the manager empathize with you and see that you're really caring for this fish's safety. And that just gives you a better chance of freeing them. And that's really all we care about, right? Getting this individual out of this situation. So don't be afraid to cry. I did it. We got to do what we got to do to save a life. Explain to them, just be honest with the manager, explain to them that you're worried for this fish's safety, that they look very sick, they look ill, they're probably going to die on the shelf that same day if you don't get them out of there. And a lot of these pet stores don't have the capacity to rehabilitate animals. That if they die, it's just collateral damage. So tell them that you have experience with fish, you know how to take care of them, you can tell them all the materials you have. Just kind of like word vomit out how concerned you are, how well prepared you are, how you really think you can save this individual's life, because they're going to die in the pet store that same day without you. And they might try to give you like a discount. They might say, okay, well, we can give fish to you half price. Don't take them up on that. When that happened to me, when I tried to liberate a fish, and they said, I can give them to you half price. I responded with, well, I don't want to buy them if they're just going to die. And that's a very messed up way to speak about somebody in someone's life. But that's the lingo that they use. These fish are treated like commodities as pets. Of course, we don't really think that way about them, but we need to get on their level, talk money, because that's, what this industry is concerned about. So those are the steps that I have for trying to negotiate release of a fish. The most important thing is to make sure that you're properly equipped to care for these animals, because you don't want to be in a situation where you have them and then, you can't take care of them properly. And you want to give them a better life. You want to give them the life that they deserve. I'll tell you all a really brief story about the fish that I liberated. His name was Spooky Joe. So I went into a large chain pet store and I saw this fish, and me and Trey and I were in there, and Trey actually thought that this fish was dead. So he was floating upside down, looked very sick, very ill. We thought he was dead. So we went to a manager, and we saw that he was alive. He moved a little bit. So we went to a manager. I went through all the steps. They did actually end up releasing him to me. They tried to, make me pay half price for him, but I was like, I'm not going to do that. So they let us walk out with him, and we carried him out, and it was a great day. He went home with me. He lived in my 10-gallon tank. We named him Spooky Joe because it was in October. Unfortunately, he only lived about 5 days. So he was very sick when I got him. And like he recovered a little bit. He was swimming around more. He was in nice heated water. He had oxygen in the water. He lived a better life for the, brief 5 days that he was alive. And even if I could have just given him a moment of comfort before he passed, I mean, that's worth it. And that's what we're all trying to fight for. So good luck out there with your animal liberation activities. And I'll drop those links to the article and the food alternatives in the chat. So thank you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Peyton. So real quick before we wrap up, we're going to throw it back to Erica, and she's just going to kind of talk about how we can kind of like what Peyton was talking about, how we can help some of these animals. And yeah, take it away, Erica.
All right. Hello. Can you see my screen? Yay. All right, so how can we speak up for marine life? So one of my favorite ways to speak up for animals all the way around is to use strategic campaigns. So strategic campaigns are very specific campaigns to make companies stop doing certain things to animals, stop selling certain animals. It's a specific target with a specific ask. So an example of that would be one of PETA campaigns, which is to get Petco to stop selling betta fish. Another campaign, for example, would be there's an activist who, she's a grassroots activist who focuses solely on hermit crabs and getting sensations to stop selling hermit crabs. So this is something you can do on an individual level, create your own campaign similar to what this grassroots activist has done. She uses all of her time to speak up for hermit crabs and to try to get sensations to stop selling hermit crabs. Or you can join another strategic campaign that a larger organization is doing and help them push it. For example, the Petco one, you can organize a protest or give out leaflets. And this is very successful. Because of a campaign like this, Walmart stopped selling betta fish recently. And it's just a step-by-step to getting all animals banned from pet stores. And it's a chip in the animal cruelty world. Another thing we can do is if you see somebody fishing, talk to them. It can seem daunting, especially because a lot of fishers aren't the nicest. My parents are actually vegan now. They were the ones who grew up fishing. And that's just goes to show how people can have a change of heart. They live on a boat and they would never, ever consider fishing anymore. Just because I talked to them and it took them a while, but eventually they got it. And every conversation you have is a step towards that empathy and the thinking. Some people don't get it right away, but you can be a step for them in the right direction towards giving them that empathy towards fish. So one thing I like to say when I see fishers is I always have my dog with me. So I always say, would you do that? Would you put a hook through her mouth? Or you can say anything like, why would you hurt that fish, or stop hurting fish? Just something to make them think. A lot of people go out throughout their whole lives without hearing any backlash about fishing because nobody ever talks about it, like with other animals. So basically anything you say will throw them off guard and make them think about it. So don't be afraid to talk to fishers. Another thing is you can leaflet. Fish Feel has printable fact sheets you could give out. PETA has free leaflets about fishing and eating fish that you can order from me. If you want to email me, ericaw@peta.org, I can give you any of the materials I talk about. We also have leaflets on pet stores. Leaflets about buying fish from pet stores and things like that and how they're treated. And you can just give those out in front of a grocery store or to people who are fishing or just people, you know, to have them on hand in case a conversation ever comes up about fish or fishing. Another thing you can do is hold demonstrations. So one of the ones I've done was on the bottom left. That was a demonstration to spread awareness about fish killed for food. And anything like eye-catching, the more eye-catching, the more likely somebody is to stop and look at it, the more likely somebody is to take a picture of it and post it on social media, the more likely it's going to get attention if you post it on social media, and the more media is going to be interested in it. So anything to make people think. Protest, you can protest. The one with me in a bridge right there. I was protesting a crab feast in Annapolis, Maryland. They're big on eating crabs. So that was a big crab feast. And we called it a contortion crab. So media was very interested and they covered it. So anything to make people think. You can also protest with strategic campaigns. So like the Petco one or the Sensations one, you can protest in front of a Petco or protest in front of whatever you're targeting. Next one, always include fish in your vegan outreach. Always, always, always. If you're doing a cube or if you organize it yourself, make sure to always include footage of fish. And if somebody else is an organizer and they're not using fish, like maybe bring it up that maybe we should include fish in this. Never exclude fish from your conversations with people. Fish are so rarely talked about within vegans, the least talked about, and they're also the most abused. And like we already talked about, there's trillions and trillions and trillions of them being killed. So it's very important to be including them in our outreach. And lastly, adopt, don't shop. Never buy any fish or animals, and liberate fish if you can. And also another way to get a companion fish is like Facebook groups. People are giving away free fish that they can't take care of anymore. If somebody's moving, oftentimes they are looking for somebody to take their fish. So things like that. Companion fish are always in need of homes. And if you can't surrender one, that's always an option, and to be on the lookout for fish who need homes. And that's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you, Erica. Cool. So we're about to move into the question and answer portion. Just a reminder, this workshop is through AAM, Animal Activism Mentorship. And we have free workshops like this all the time. So be sure to join our Facebook group, Animal Activism Mentorship, to keep up with that. Or you can follow us on Instagram, Animal Activism Mentorship. And something that we also do in addition to these workshops is we offer personal one-on-one mentorship for activism. So if you or somebody you know has been thinking about getting active or ramping up your activism, or have questions about activism or anything like that, and you think you could benefit from a mentor, you can sign up for free at animalactivismmentorship.com and get hooked up with a mentor who can teach you and help you out, help you bounce ideas on activism, and you know, whatever you need. So if you or someone you know wants to take advantage of that free resource, please do. You just fill out the form at animalactivismmentorship.com. With that being said, if you have any questions, now is the time. Just remember, we are recording and we're planning on posting this later. So if you don't feel like being on camera, just drop your question in the chat or just turn off your camera if you need to. And that'll be okay. So right now I'll open it up. If you have any questions, you can drop it in the chat or come on and just let us know.
Well, I have a question. I I was wondering if there's any vegan fish food, if anybody knows if there's vegan fish food, or if fish can even be vegan for companion animals. I was thinking about adopting a fish, but I was wondering about like buying fish food and things like that. I was wondering if any of you knew.
There is definitely vegan fish food, because the last time we were taking care of the sanctuary, they pointed some out to Evan, but I don't know what it was, but I know it exists.
Debbie says, can you give some more ways to confront fishermen? I see them at the beach and don't even know how to start a conversation. I struggle with this myself because we usually go, my girlfriend's dad lives at the beach, and we visit him and we go out on the beach, and I see people fishing, and it really bothers me. You know, the thought has run through my mind to just like go pretend like I'm checking out their catches and just take the cooler and throw them back in the water. I don't know what the legal ramifications are for that. I'm sure that, you know, there's probably something there that would maybe get you arrested or get you in some kind of trouble. But yeah, that's what I want to do. But there's also there's videos of people doing this online, like going up to fishermen and talking to them. Does anybody have any personal experience with this? Go ahead, Shannon. Not surprised.
Erica too, it looks like, but yeah, I tend to always come across them out in the middle of nowhere where it might not be like the most safe situation, and I still have to say something. But I normally, at the very least, will just say, like, how would you feel if you were just going about your day and some other being had tried to trick you into putting a painful hook through the side of your face and ripping you out of your home away from your friends and family members, and then you're suffocating and like, why are you doing this? Just something at least along those lines. But I mean, I know you're not really supposed to like stereotype and profile people, but I kind of do to an extent. If they're older, if I can tell they're sport fishing, if I could tell they don't really know what they're doing and they look like they're just throwing the line, or if they look like they're like serious. I mean, people who are serious fishermen who are out there like late on a dock, you might be putting yourself at risk if you're saying things, you know. But if it's daytime and you've got people who are tourists who are all fishing, then saying things might be a lot more well received, or at least might be a lot more people around here, a little more safe. It just really depends, I guess. But it's good, like Erica said earlier, to always say something to make them think. But Erica, I'll let you go ahead and say your experiences.
Yeah. Well, I don't like confrontation, so I just say something really quick and then leave, and you can always do that. Obviously what Shannon does is better, but just leaving them with something and making them think about it is important if you don't want to even have a conversation with them. I don't talk to people that are my boat neighbors, like, unless they ask about it. Actually, the boat right next to us, I talked to because he asked about it, because I live right next to them and I don't want that feud, and they know I'm animal rights, so like they get the message. But like people, I only talk to people who like they're transients, or they're just there fishing and I won't see them again. And that makes it safer because I don't know. For people who are scared, it's just easier to do it with strangers and to do it quickly if you're scared of it. And you can work up to talking more, like what Shannon does, and that's great. And you can always start with like little statements like, hey, would you do that to a dog? Or why do you hate fish? Or something simple, and just walk away.
Why do you hate fish?
What are you eating? Like, and I also like to have leaflets on me. So if you just want to like hand them a leaflet and then leave, you can do that too.
Yeah, I've had some people be really receptive and some people get really upset and aggressive. Actually just the other day when I was in Walmart, there was a mom and dad and 2 young girls, and they had a pink sparkly fishing pole. And I pulled my mask down momentarily because I was away from people, but I wanted them to see who was talking. And I was like, you know, we don't have to fish. So like teaching our kids to take these innocent animals out of their homes and away from their families. So a lot of time when the kids are with parents, this situation was a little different because they were buying the murdering pole. But we've come across, well, Erica knows Josie. We were walking up in Virginia or Maryland, somewhere in the woods, and we came across a family that was fishing. And it's good to bring up, you know, that things like that we should teach our children to be kind and compassionate. And this isn't something that should be a hobby or a sport or family fun. This is literally violence towards innocent animals. And like Erica said, if you want to say things like that quick, sometimes I just might not have the opportunity to have a whole conversation. I might be driving or I might be with people who aren't comfortable, and I'll always at least say something out the window like that. Like, find a new hobby that doesn't murder others, or you know, fishing hurts, whatever it is. But always say something over nothing, unless it's going to be very dangerous.
I'll add one more thing, something that you can do, like if you are just, you know, relaxing on the beach and people are walking by and fishing around you and stuff like that, is if you're in a spot where you can write a little message in the sand that just says something like "fish feel pain," or, you know, something like that. That's something that I tried to do the last time I was out, but the spot we were in, it was just, you know, where you could write in the sand, like the water was coming up too far and I just wasn't able to get it done. But that's something that I tried to do, and I know some spots it'd be easier to do that. So if you're in a spot where you can write in the sand, you can always do that, and people walking by will see your message.
Yeah, Evan and I used to chalk all the time at these docks by my parents' house where fishermen leave early in the morning. So we'd go late at night because they woke up before us. But that's another idea.
Debbie said that she would surf near there and just try to scare the fish away so that they don't get caught. I think that's a great strategy.
Aww.
All right, we'll open it up.
Also, if you're on the, oh, sorry, can I add something about that? If you're on the beach, sometimes people have fishing poles that they'll like leave in the sand with a hook in the water. Definitely don't cut their fishing line because that's illegal. Also, if you see a bucket of fish that people have caught and there's nobody near it, definitely don't throw them back in the ocean because that's illegal too. But yeah, sometimes people will leave their poles, you know, just, yeah, don't do illegal things, you know.
Unless you want to deal with the repercussions. No, we had there's actually somebody that had thrown a fish back in the water in Clearwater, and it was interesting. About 8 months later, Florida brought charges up against him, and he didn't like win or lose at the end of the day. It was like weird. I think he did have to pay some type of a fine, but it wasn't a complete loss, but it wasn't a complete win either. So yeah, just you know, whatever you do, just be ready to deal after.
All right.
All right, were we going to show some good stuff? I brought my Tuno here.
Oh, I didn't know we were doing show and tell. Yeah, go ahead.
I got these babies for $1 something a piece. 2 different brand. Well, they're both Loma Linda brand. 2 different flavors. One's just regular, and the other one is lemon pepper. And Vegan Evan is a big fan.
Nice. All right, let's open it up for some more questions if anybody has any. Feel free to just unmute or type it in the chat. All right, we'll give it another few seconds in case anybody wants to ask anything. If we don't get a question in a few seconds, we'll wrap it up here. Last chance for questions. Marion said, where did you say to get good leaflets? Go ahead, Erica.
You can just email me at ericaw@peta.org. I'm going to put it in the chat. And I can send you some leaflets if you would like.
All right, any other questions? Last chance.
Also, PETA has awesome posters about fish that Erica was holding in her presentation in the pictures.
They're great with pressure campaigns too.
Yep, if you want posters or anything to do with the protests or anything, just email me. I can send you things.
Remember, everybody, if we can get people to understand the fishes and the sea life, then pretty much everybody else comes along, the chickens and the turkeys and the pigs and the cows.
Yep. All right, last chance for questions. I'm gonna do a 5-second countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, thanks everybody so much for being here. Thanks for caring enough about sea life and aquatic animals and so-called bait animals to come check this out and learn about them, and hopefully we've provided some information that can improve your advocacy and just, expand your knowledge on this